Hello friends, I am Jonathan Pishner with Apex Counseling, and today I want to talk about a very common subject in psychology and counseling, which is stress and self-care. But I want to talk about a piece of it that is not often brought up because self-care is becoming very, very well known as something that everybody needs to do. You can Google that term and find all kinds of stuff. Here's the part that is not nearly as well known, and I really spend a lot of time helping people realize this in the counseling room, which is the medical necessity of self-care. Because I think a lot of people understand that it's better for their functioning if they are relaxed, if they find times to de-stress. But here's the part that is not as well known. Stress, when it happens once for a short period, is fine. Stress, when it happens day in and day out in a chronic way, creates a process in the body that is biological. When you have too much cortisol, which is one of your stress response hormones, and too much adrenaline, which is one of your other stress response hormones, whenever these are present in your system too much, you actually start to get a breakdown of a number of other processes in your body. And one of the things that a lot of people sadly believe, because they don't realize the biological nature of this, is they think that when you're trying to de-stress, that it's all about outthinking your stress. And in fact, counseling helps with that in some ways. Many of the psychological theories we use are about outthinking your stress in certain ways. But at some level, that stops working if a person is not taking proper time for self-care. Because what happens is, as these chemicals build up in your body, your biological processes start to break down. And they break down to such an extent that cortisol and adrenaline being too present and chronic stress have been linked to a number of actual medical issues, including heart disease, high blood pressure, and loss of bone minerals, which was surprising to me when I looked this up. Suppressed immune system. Spread of cancer is actually linked to this, and there is some research going into whether or not it can actually cause cancer to be more likely to even start. And the list goes on. So one of the things that a lot of people do is they attempt to outrun a biological process by just thinking differently. And after a certain level, that no longer works. So the thing I want to talk about today, and just give everybody permission to do, blanket permission, is to take care of themselves in a way where they're able to separate from stress. As a medical professional, it never occurred to me getting into this field that one of the things that I would do is make my formal medical recommendation that people go and do certain self-care activities. Last week, I medically recommended that someone go get their hair done. And the reason that conversation came about was because we were talking about how chronic stress was impacting this person. And it came out how exactly how that experience was for her. And it let me know, oh, this experience allows your body to start reducing cortisol levels. This is going to be massively beneficial for you psychologically. So we skipped over, let's examine your thought process, and said, okay, your homework this week is go get your hair done because of the massive benefit that produces biologically for you. And all that recommendation gets made a lot of different times in a lot of different ways. The sad part is, because most people don't understand that there's a biological process at play here, is they don't make any time for self-care. And in addition to that, they often think themselves weak for needing it. If you were going to have a life-saving surgery, you would not come up with the idea that, oh, I don't have time to go have a heart bypass, I have to get to work. Most people would not come up with that. And yet, day in and day out, people always come up with the idea, well, I don't really have time to take care of myself today. Maybe I'll do it next week. And it gets pushed off and pushed off and pushed off. And chronic stress builds and builds and builds. So this entire video is an advertisement for please take care of yourself and please make time to do that, because you cannot psychologically outwit your biology. If chronic stress builds up too much, your cortisol and adrenaline levels get to a certain point, your body starts to break down and your brain starts to break down. Cognitive impairment is one of the things that comes from chronic stress. If you are cognitively impaired and your neocortex and your hippocampus are not working properly, you can't outwit your stress levels, because that's literally the thing you use to outthink any of your problems. So the piece of your brain that you would use for that isn't working properly anyway. Now, when it comes to self-care, the nice thing about this is you don't have to make time to go do big elaborate stuff. Really, most of the time, if you can separate from stress for very short periods, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, that produces the effect you need. That's why some of these things like journaling and meditation come into fashion every few years, because they're a new way that people have stumbled on that is a very, very short time commitment, but that produces a marked benefit. When you're thinking of self-care, yeah, do the big stuff. Go get an hour and a half massage and definitely go on vacation. But bring it also down to, what are the 5-minute and 10-minute practices I can do to help reduce my stress levels? Those are actually the ones that matter, and those are the ones that people are most likely to put off and say, well, okay, let me just keep working. Well, I don't have time for that. If you find that 5 minutes of having a nice cup of tea in the morning and reading the newspaper relaxes your body and relaxes your mind, that probably means it's also helping to reduce your cortisol levels and your stress response levels. And that means it's biologically important for you to do that activity. So as I say this to everyone, please remember, self-care is medically necessary. Stress produces a biological impact on the body that after a certain point you can't outthink. Please make time for self-care, the big stuff, but also look for those little things. Small practices really add up. If you have 2 or 3 or 4 small daily practices that help you separate from stress, that by itself might put you back below the line where your cortisol levels are no longer building to dangerous areas. So hopefully this is helpful for somebody out there. Please practice good self-care, and thank you for listening to me for a few minutes today. I'm Jonathan Pishner with Apex Counseling, and I will see you next time.